Matt Schaefer for the introduction. But more important than that, I want to thank him for his representation of Tyler, Texas in the state legislature. You have a true patriot representing you in Austin, Texas, and that is what is needed now more than ever. I do want to thank my friend Cole Hefner for being here and for his friendship and for all the things that we work on together, including the future pathway of education. And I'm very close friends with your state senator, Brian Hughes, who also shares my efforts. I want to thank Dr. Ferguson. You know, as Matt Schaefer pointed out, my wife is a former principal, and one thing that you learn through that pathway is that you almost know immediately when you walk onto a campus whether or not that's a good quality campus or it has problems. The moment we entered the door here tonight, I could tell this is an outstanding educational institution. Thank you, Dr. Ferguson, for what you're doing to help educate the kids. I want to thank Pastor Garner and Carly Barton for sharing their stories. Incredibly important stories. In fact, stories is what this is all about. There are many of you here tonight. Some look like you may be parents, you could be grandparents, you could be friends, you could be just somebody interested. You all have a story that involves education, that you see the way that it shapes someone's life. But I'm going to reduce to one single word the mission that we're on. We're on a mission here in Tyler tonight. It's the same mission I was on in Amarillo last week, and Corsicana, and Conroe, and other places across the state. But Kennedy is a mission that began the state of Texas to begin with. Because last week, we celebrated something in our state. We celebrated Texas Independence Day.
Yes.
In Texas, we believe in freedom.
Yes.
Woo!
Yes.
And when you think about it, there may be no more profound freedom that's actually necessary than the freedom of parents being empowered to make the best decisions for their child. Why should a parent relinquish that power to somebody else?
That's right.
That somebody else can, and in some cases has, steered a parent's child down the wrong pathway.
Yep.
No
That's
one
right.
should take from a parent what is rightfully theirs, and that is the responsibility to be the primary educator of their child. That is why we are gathered in Tyler, Texas tonight.
Woo!
Let me emphasize and underscore in bold and in caps to begin with. I am a very strong supporter of public schools. Public schools play a vital role in our state. I am a product of public schools in the state of Texas. Not too far down the road from where you are. My elementary school years were in Longview, Texas. Went to junior high and high school. There you go.
Wow.
Went to junior high and high school in Duncanville Public Schools. I see the power of what public schools can do. More important than that, perhaps, because of where we are today, I've seen the success of our schools. Texas, you know, I'm proud, Dr. Ferguson, to hear that you were ranked as a blue ribbon school for a couple of years. I'm proud to tell you, as we gather in Tyler tonight, in the most recent announcements, Texas ranks #1 in the entire United States of America for more blue ribbon schools than any state in the United States of America.
Woo!
Texas has one of the highest high school graduation rates of any state in America. And another report that just came out it's called the Nation's Report Card, about testing results from 4th and 8th grade reading and math that came out for the last year. I'm proud to tell you this, and that is if you look at all the large states, and listen to the large states like Texas and Florida, and California, New York, and Tennessee, Illinois, etc. A little bit different than Connecticut and Kansas. We know that. But if you look at the top 10 most populous states in the country, in Texas, black students in math and reading were ranked number 1 among all those states. And we're going to do more. Listen, I'm proud to tell you that no governor has authorized and signed his name to a budget that provided more spending for education than any governor in the history of Texas. I've authorized more money for teacher pay raises than any governor in the history of Texas. Per student funding is now at an all-time high. And this session we're working on right now, I can tell you for a fact, we will be adding billions of more dollars to public education, including more raises for our teachers. But all that said, I think everybody here would agree with me with this fact. More money does not always lead to better results.
That's true.
You know, when I was growing up in Longview, we were taught the basics. Reading, writing, math, and science.
Yep.
But we were also taught something very profound. We were inspired by our country's founding and how it stands apart from the rest of the world as the beacon for liberty and opportunity. Unfortunately, not all kids today are being educated the way that you and I were.
Nope.
We saw this prolifically in one example when I was in Conroe, Texas recently. And there was a principal of the elementary school there who had taught in public schools her entire life, but had problems increasingly. But the straw that broke the camel's back was when she witnessed a history teacher in that public school use his position as a history teacher to get his students to disrespect the flag of the United States of America. Let me tell you something. We will not use your taxpayer dollars to teach our kids to hate our country or to disrespect our flag. If I was asked, okay, name just one thing and only one thing that should be taught in our schools, it would be this. Teach our students, our next generation, why and how 13 colonies went on to become the mightiest and strongest and the best country in the history of the entire world, and what must be done to perpetuate it. There are a lot of frustrations these days from so many parents. Parents still angry about their kid being forced to wear a mask.
Yep.
Angry about watching their kid have to learn from home.
Yep.
Only to watch them struggle in that effort over Zoom or virtual learning. And in front of the parents' very own eyes, watching their child fall behind.
That's right.
And it seemed like it was around that time when kids were learning from home, during COVID, when parents really began to learn a whole lot more what was being taught to their kids in school.
Yep.
And now it's been exposed dramatically. And I got to tell you, anyone who thinks this is something that happens maybe in Dallas and Houston would be wrong. It happens in urban, suburban, and rural areas where parents are angry about their child having a woke agenda forced on them.
Yes.
Let me tell you something.
Yes.
Schools should not be pushing woke agendas.
Amen.
Our schools are for education,
That's
not
right.
indoctrination.
Woo!
So, across all schools, we must reform curriculum. Get kids back to the basics of learning. And we must empower parents. Parents have the right and deserve access to curriculum, to a child library, and what their children are being taught. And we will accomplish that and more with my parental bill of rights that we will pass this session to protect all parents in all schools across the entire state of Texas.
Woo!
The fact of the matter is, no one knows what is better for their own child's success than their parent. When it comes to education, parents matter. It's just that simple. Parents deserve education freedom to be able to help their child succeed. And the way to do that is through school choice with state-funded education savings accounts. We've seen them work very effectively in other states. And we've also already seen them work here in the state of Texas. I created education savings accounts for special needs students here in the state of Texas. And the legislature liked it so much, they turned it into law with an overwhelming supermajority of bipartisan groups. And now this session, they want to provide even more funding. Also, what we want to do this session is to expand that program so that every parent will have the ability to choose the education that's best for their child. So, it gets kind of confusing because a lot of people raise a lot of concerns about this. And listen, when new things come along, there's always some concerns. But the concerns that have been raised are really a repeat of what was raised about 20 years ago. About 20 years ago is the time when we had charter schools begin in Texas. And at that time, people were making the same argument that they're making today. They're saying that if we expand into school choice, it's going to lead to a defunding of public schools. And it will destroy high school football. We saw after 20 years now of charter schools, with more than 350,000 students in charter schools across Texas. Schools are not being defunded. We're adding more money to schools than before. And I got to tell you, high school football in Texas is better than it's ever been. My Duncanville Panthers won the state championship this past year, and I can tell you, high school football is doing great. But to put a punctuation point on this, under the school choice program, all public schools will be fully funded for every student. We will ensure that public education will have the resources they need to educate our kids. That's one of our goals. But the fact is, we've seen this remarkable success from these school choice programs, ESAs, education savings accounts, and other states, that the kids deserve that in Texas also.
Yes.
The parents deserve it in Texas. We've seen in states that have used education savings accounts, the education improved for the students and parents that use it, but also the education improved for the public schools that those students left. One quick example. Also about 20 years ago, Florida went down the pathway of education savings accounts. All the same concerns being raised in Texas were raised then. They said it was going to set back students. The fact of the matter is, if you look at the category of students who come from low-income families, in Florida, before education savings accounts, they ranked 33rd in the United States. Now, 20 years after education savings accounts in Florida, those same students who come from the most economically challenged families, those students rank #1 in the United States of America. That is what our kids deserve in Texas. So this is not an either-or situation. People say you got to either be for school choice or for public schools, one or the other. Have it one way or the other. That's not the case. We can have it both ways. We can both improve public education while at the very same time empower our parents. And know this, the concepts I'm talking about are extraordinarily popular among all segments of the state of Texas. If you are a Republican, a Democrat, or an independent, large majorities support it. If you're black, white, Hispanic, or Asian, large majorities support it. If you're from urban, suburban, or rural Texas, large majorities support this. And the reason is obvious. Parents want empowerment over the future of their own children.
Yes.
Well, this issue is so vital to our state, I made education freedom an emergency item this legislative session. So here's the deal. Everyone here has a role to play. This isn't about you coming and hearing a speech and going home and going about your way. In democracy, everyone has a role to play. Know this fact. While you're busy with your kids, while you're busy on education here in Tyler, while you're busy at your job, earning a living, going to the grocery store, cooking meals, taking care of your home, whatever, there are people who are paid for a living. Hundreds, thousands of people who make a living getting paid to be in the state capitol, talking to legislators every single day, saying, do not pass this school choice plan. Well, guess what? I believe your voice matters just as much as anybody else's voice. It's time to turn your voice into power and make sure that you advocate for parental empowerment and education freedom here in the great state of Texas.
Yes. Woo!
The way to do this would be something you may be thinking, well, I really don't have time for that, whatever. You have 5 minutes. I know that much. You got 5 minutes. 5 minutes is all the time it takes. As Mandy, the next speaker, will explain to you, all you need to do is to call your legislator, call your House of Representatives member, call your Senate member, and let them know what your position is on school choice, what your position is on parental empowerment. And you may not talk to them. You may talk to the receptionist or the person in charge of the policy that takes note. And when you call, they will take note. Who's for it, who's against it. And if you don't like to call, you can email, you can text. There's so many ways you can communicate. You cannot avoid it. You can also not avoid the future of your kids or our kids.
Amen.
You can't avoid it. You can look the other way. But the fact of the matter is the future of Texas, in fact, what we're living with today, is and will always be, and to some extent, a byproduct of what is going on in the classroom. This is not something that you can turn your back on. The time to get involved is now. The time to put your voice into play is now. So let me close with two ideas. One is this notion. Many of you may be familiar, because you may have heard it from me or from some others, what our goal and aspiration has been as it concerns jobs and the economy. I made it very clear when I first became governor what our position was and what our goal was. Our goal was to be number one. Last week I received what's called the Governor's Cup. The Governor's Cup goes to the state that ranks number one amongst all states in the United States for the most new jobs created from economic development projects. Texas is number one in the United States for the most jobs added. But the important thing about it is not that we won it. The fact is we've won it for 11 years in a row. When I became governor in my first State of the State address, I noticed how other states were ahead of Texas as it concerned higher education. And they had more what are called Tier 1 research universities. I said, Texas belongs being number one. We made the investments, we employed the strategy, and I'm proud to tell you as we're in Tyler, Texas tonight, Texas now ranks number one among the states in the United States for the most Tier 1 Reach universities.
Woo!
So what is our goal for education?